Want to know what the movers and shakers of New Hampshire's performing arts are thinking? Welcome to New Hampshire Unscripted with your host, Ray Dudley.
So how are you?
Good. How are you? You lost power earlier today?
We did for like 4 hours or so.
Oh, geez.
A freak, I don't know if it was a windstorm or what, but I got home and everything, the house was freezing cold. And,
oh, gosh.
yeah.
Welcome to June in New Hampshire. Like, come on.
It must have been like a microburst or something. I don't know what the heck is going on.
Oh, well, it's funny because I only got your text message about 20 minutes ago asking about the delay. Yeah. So I'm just going to go on and hopefully he's there. And if he's not, then I'll know we delayed. I'm
like, is she blowing me off? Because I texted you like hours ago, right?
Yeah. It said 12:59. And I said to Aaron, I was like, I usually get my text messages directly to my Apple Watch because I'm not supposed to have my phone on in the classroom, but I at least see on my watch that I've got messages. So when I have a break, I can go to my phone. And so nothing came through. I was like, okay. So I just happened to open up my iPad and there it was. And I was like, okay, that's weird because I was on my iPad earlier today. So
now I know what it feels like to be ghosted. Yeah, at my age, it's not a good feeling, I'll tell you.
I don't know if it's a good feeling at any age, though.
Yeah. Hey, I do want to say thank you, first of all, for doing this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And you're going to have, I hope, a very unique perspective here because, well, we'll get into that in a second. Your path and mine have intersected several times, but we've never done much together. And
right.
So I don't know much about your background. And if you know anything about the podcast, I really try to get that out. I like to learn about people. So tell me about your theater background and why you're such an avid theater person and where that hook came from, how long you've been doing it, where are you from? Give me the whole schlemiel.
Well, my theater background, I didn't start working doing shows or anything until high school. There was no middle school or elementary school drama program at my school. But I had learned to love the theater from about 7 years old when my dad's cousin went on Broadway as Jean Valjean.
What?
And and he was Colm Wilkinson's understudy. And he was the Valjean in the first national tour. And so I was too young. I was too young at the time to see it. My parents
were these nuggets.
Yeah. Yep. So I got to see, I didn't get to see Les Mis on stage until I was 12. By then I knew all the music backwards and forwards and my parents couldn't resist it anymore. You know, they were not too keen on me singing Lovely Ladies when I was 7. But at 12, it was a little different. So
they should have seen that hook early.
Yep. So he was on Broadway. He did the national tour of Les Mis. He was in Los Angeles for a number of years doing it, and then he ended up playing. He was the Phantom for a while. He was in the revival of Annie as Daddy Warbucks. He was in Man of La Mancha. Oh yeah. He traveled the country doing it, and he also did Broadway and at Los Angeles. So the theater bug was early. It was
That's incredible.
Yep. Yeah. So it's been nice. He's come up to the Hatbox a couple of times because he, when he retired, he had some health issues, so it forced him to retire. And so when he retired from theater, I called him up, or I think I Facebook messaged him and said, "Hey, we've got Barnum coming to the Hatbox," and he was like, "I'll be there." And he drove up from Worcester, Mass, and came and saw the show. And then he came over to my parents' house for lunch and told us all kinds of stories. Like he knew Hal Prince, and
oh my God,
yeah. So very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
That's incredible.
He's my dad's first cousin, but I think of him almost like an uncle because he and my dad were really, really close. So.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So have you been in many shows yourself?
Oh, I will not go on stage.
You won't? Oh, okay.
No. I got my minor in college was theater, and at UNH at the time, I don't know if they still do this now, but whether it's a major or minor, you had to take acting 1. And you had to take history of theater, and you had to take stagecraft. Those were the 3 required classes, and then everything else were up to you. So I took acting 1 when I did my year abroad in London, so that no one I knew could see me on stage, because I had zero confidence that I could actually do any of it. I was like, no, backstage for me. Like? Being in London, I did my study abroad in London. So I did all either English major classes or theater classes. It was amazing. It was incredible to be there. Yeah. So, wow. And actually I arrived in London on the day that Princess Diana died. So I got to,
You're like a walking anthology of.
Yep. Little bits of stuff. So I have all kinds of photos from the funeral, because my friends and I went and camped out at Hyde Park. So we have all kinds of pictures that other people don't have, because our pictures were before the family started following the cortege. So it's very, very strange. And then, we went to Kensington Park and watched the funeral on the big screen, because they have big screens everywhere, all over the place. Yeah, it was bizarre. It was a very, like, my flight was filled with little me and all my stuff, because I was staying there for a year, and Boston and New York based journalists, because Diana had just passed away.
Oh my gosh.
So it was very, very strange. It was very strange.
So when you were over there, did you step foot on stage to act and find out you didn't like it? Or you've just never...
No, I took my acting 1 class, and so we had to, at the end, we had to do a showcase. And so a scene partner and I, she and I did a couple scenes from the female version of The Odd Couple. I was a ball of anxiety the entire time. And I'm fairly certain I blocked it out immediately. So I knew from then on. I only ever auditioned for 1 show in high school, and I was so thankful that Andrew did not cast me. Because it was just not my thing, which is funny, because of course I get up in front of 80 middle schoolers every single day, all the time, doing my own little dog and pony show. And that's different for me somehow.
They can't fight back hardly. So
they can't fight back. And I don't necessarily have to memorize anything.
Excellent point.
I can sort of improv my way through it. I've been doing it long enough now that I can change gears if I have to.
So you have been in the New Hampshire theater scene for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I was in. Andrew Pinard was my first director. I was one of his students when he taught at Pembroke Academy, when he taught theater there. And so I started with him when I was a freshman in high school, and did the first year he was there. He was kind of restarting the theater program, so I think we only did 2 or 3 shows that first year. And then by the time I was a senior, we were doing, I think, 5 shows a year. Usually like 3 main stages, and then we would do a festival piece and back it up with something else a little bit longer. So we kind of did a pretty intensive, but luckily at the time the school was flexible enough that you could get credit for doing certain things. So I got credit for stage managing a show. I got credit for directing. I did my senior year, I directed our festival piece. So I got credit for doing that. It's a fair, we never did it. We never did festival as a competitive thing. It was always just an experience of doing something. So it was one of those things that was like, well, it was my first chance at directing. I picked a script that didn't cost us anything. That was the only rule that Andrew gave me, was that it had to cost us nothing to put it on.
No fundraisers.
No fundraisers, no royalties. So I had found this little tiny script by a British mystery author that she had written. It was a 1-act, like 1930s, very British mystery. And so we got to have fun with costumes and things like that. And, it was fun. It was a good group of people. And I enjoyed doing the festival stuff just because it was different. Mm-hmm. Keeping everything to it, it's such a timed, well-oiled machine by the time you get to festival. It's a little stressful, but I enjoyed it. I think I stage managed my first festival piece my sophomore year.
Was it the kind of festival where you have so many minutes to prep, so many minutes to perform, and then so many to get off?
Yeah, I think it was a total of 45 minutes. So everything was, pretty tight 1-acts. And if you had a piece that was longer to set up, then you had less time to actually perform it. Yeah. So my sophomore year, we did a piece that Andrew adapted from a John Collier short story called Evening Primrose. And it was super tech heavy. we had moving set pieces and we had all kinds of sound effects and stuff like that. But, it was a weird piece because that's what, festival gives you the chance to be a little, experimental.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the adjudicators was sitting right in front of me, and I'm on the headset, like talking everybody through all the moving pieces. And afterwards, that person came up to me and said, I can't believe A, you're a sophomore, and B, that you guys just did that in 45 minutes, because it just required a lot of like, okay, group A, you have to go now because group B is going to be in 30 seconds. The walls had to move, and they had to move in a certain orientation to actually work because the actors had to walk between them. And yeah, it was crazy, but.
And those adjudicators, they'll let you know if something doesn't go right.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not soft on their opinion, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I had been doing theater. I did theater all through high school, and then my freshman year of college at UNH, I took that first semester off from doing any theater just because I wasn't a theater major. I started out as a political science, international affairs, and German triple major because I wanted to be in the CIA. I wanted to go into diplomatic service and stuff like that. So I was a crazy triple major for a semester until a political science professor convinced me that I probably wouldn't get into the CIA because he's like, you're 5 feet tall and no one's going to believe you.
Well, like they have one of those things like at Disney World, if you're like...
Yeah, I'm like, whereas then I had an English professor who was like, well, if you want to be the female Jack Ryan, you could just write female Jack Ryan stories and then you can do whatever the hell you want. And go. I was like, sold. So I switched to an English major almost instantaneously.
And the royalties have never stopped coming in, have they?
Yeah. And then by then I was in England. So I started doing the theater stuff over there when I was in England. So when I came back as a junior, I just had to take like history of theater and stagecraft were the 2 required ones that I had to take to finish my minor. But I also took stage management, and I took props and, all kinds of every tech thing that I could take, I took.
So where do you find yourself leaning now? What part?
Definitely stage managing. Since the Hatbox opened, I have stage managed, I think 21 productions.
Really?
Yeah. Since the Hatbox opened. And I production managed, I think 5 or 6. So I think I'm almost at 30. I'm very close to 30 productions.
Can't be many people that beat that, right? I mean,
I don't know. I think my husband might be close. He's in
he's been in that many, but I don't think
he's been in that many.
So of all the stuff you've stage managed, and we'll get to 7 days here in a minute. Tell Aaron, we'll get to it, I promise. Which have you found to be the most intriguing and the most difficult that they've tried to put on there?
Oh, I mean,
1776 was a huge crowd.
1776 was a huge cast. And that was, I remember they were getting ready in the dressing rooms and the back room and the back hallway. It was a sea of people all the time.
And for folks who don't know, that all of those areas you just mentioned probably hold about 5 people.
Yes, comfortably about 5 people. Yeah. So I think 1776 probably, because they also didn't have a small set. They had the entire, congressional, that room, the Continental Congress room with all the chairs and all the, so I think that was probably the kind of craziest setup that I've ever seen for a piece in such a small venue.
It was pretty aggressive to do that.
Yeah. Very aggressive. I enjoyed it, but I like that show. I love the music and everything. So I would say that was probably, I was not involved with that one. I think probably the most complicated one that I've been involved in might have been Spelling Bee. Was interesting because you have that element of improv associated with also the singing. And Spelling Bee was actually my return to musicals. I hadn't done a musical in 20 years or something like that. So that one was a reminder for me of why I don't do musicals very often. And then, of course, I've done. I did Into the Woods last summer. That was a really, really good experience. And I did Puffs up at the Colonial last year with Brian, which was and also an incredible experience because it's a very different venue.
Definitely.
One of the more rewarding pieces I've done was Greg Gaskell's Ray of Light. It was a 1 weekend, 1 woman show with Carrie-Elle. And
is that where she wakes up, she starts to show up drunk?
Yes. That was actually the first show that Carrie-Elle and I ever did together.
Kidding.
Yeah. And that was probably one of the most rewarding experiences just because I got to see it from the ground up. When I started working with them, Greg hadn't finished writing Act 2 yet. Oh
my God.
So, seeing it kind of come alive with the two of them was incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
I had forgotten that Carrie-Elle, that was a 1-woman show. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I went to see it, but I did. And I thought, who is this woman? Where did she come from? And then, so she's done it. Deirdre's done it. There are many people who have done 1-woman shows.
1 woman. Yeah. It's a challenge. And to
Emily
do a
Carell comes close, but hers wasn't.
Yeah, because she did Mary and Me, and she traveled with that one for a while. Yeah, I would say honestly, one of the ones I'm most proud of. There's 2 that I'm really, really proud of. Other than Ray of Light, just because seeing it go from literally nothing to this piece was amazing.
QCI, you got to stick that in there. QCI.
QCI. Of course, I always enjoy going to QCI.
Of course you do.
Of course. I'm a little biased there, but I would say Background Check, which was another Gaskell comedy. It was my first experience working with Gary Locke as a director. And I'd worked with Gary before. He was an actor in 12th Night and Macbeth and things like that. So I'd worked with him before, but I hadn't worked with him as a director yet. And that was just every single day was a joyful experience. It was just so much fun. It was a great group of people. But the one I'm doing, that was...
Is that where Aaron had the hair on his chest? Is that the...
No, that was 8. He's yelling from the living room. That was 8x8. No, Background Check was the one where Aaron was the concierge with the really, really funny accent. Yes, that was Background Check.
That was hysterical. I remember that.
That was just hysterical, and that process was a lot of fun. But actually, the one that is most incredibly special right now is what I'm doing now. Virginia Woolf has got to be.
You gotta go see that.
I saw it last weekend. Did you tell?
He's already seen it, honey.
Yeah.
Yeah, Virginia Woolf has been. I mean, the read through. Gary and I just kept making eyes at each other, going, "This could go up tomorrow and be incredible."
Yeah.
And it's just been tremendous. Everybody has brought their game the entire time.
I was talking to Brian Halpern today, and I said, unfortunately, the cast was wonderful. But unfortunately, Emily, right? Emily?
Yep, Emily Carell. Yep.
Yeah. Was on the role, she was underutilized. She's such a deep and wonderful actress, and the script just didn't give her all that much to do.
Yeah. I think it's Albie's one flub of that script is that Honey is literally a blank slate, and and I haven't read the other version because apparently there's another version of the script that gives Honey more material, and she and George apparently have a scene together in this other version, but you're not allowed to perform that version anymore.
Really?
You can only do the definitive edition, which is the one that we have. Yeah, I think that's the one downside, is that character could be much more. I think Emily has brought an incredible amount to it.
Yeah.
Just because there's so little actually provided.
Yeah. I was watching her during certain parts, and she does these little things that, and I was sitting on the side, so I was like facing her at certain times.
Yeah.
And this little thing, like when she's falling asleep on the chair. The way she subtly does it, it was so cute, but it worked. You could tell she actually put effort into falling. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, I'm supposed to fall asleep,
Yep. Yeah. Oh, they're all 4 of them are just consummate actors, and like to watch them. And it's one of the things I love about stage managing, is being able to see people go through their process and how everyone has a slightly different process.
Yeah.
And to see all of them really working with these characters and working with each other has been incredible.
It was such a raw, visceral cat and mouse game. It was just at times crude and vicious.
Yep.
It's dark. I mean, there's no other way around it.
Dark. Yeah, it is. It's dark. And yet it's tragic, and it's a bizarre love story. It's really, really challenging. Yeah. But I'm so proud of that particular production. It's been such a joy. Oddly enough, it's been a joy to work on this piece.
I hope everybody who has seen it loves it, because I did. I mean, I can't imagine walking out of there and saying, that was terrible.
I hope we have one more weekend left. So I'm hoping we can really, fill it up a little bit more.
The audience has been tough to fill?
No, I think we've averaged, I think we've had over 100 each weekend, but
okay.
It's like, okay, that's good. But this is one of those pieces that I'm like, this is lightning in a bottle. This is not going to happen again. Yeah. Getting these 4 people on that beautiful set in such an intimate space is not going to happen again.
Yeah. In a classic play. I mean, an American classic play. Jeez.
Yeah.
Kudos to Alex for pushing to get that done, because I just don't think there are enough classics really done. Good ones. Everybody's into trying to save money, so they like to do Shakespeare because they don't have to pay any royalties. So they do 9 different versions of Shakespeare: contemporary, rap, thug, whatever they can come up with. But there's such a great wealth of true drama and theater out there. It just, and that's a beautiful theater for it. That's exactly where that should be.
Yeah, because it's an intimate space, and it's a bizarrely, tragically intimate story. So it works.
It made me very glad I don't know those people.
Yes, definitely.
So happy they're not my neighbors. So tell Aaron we're moving on. And, so give me, first of all, your overall perspective of how you think the 7 days went.
I think they went beyond my expectations.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that, of course, the timing of it was weird because, we'd only gotten married a few weeks before, and it was like, okay, we were in multiple different projects. I was in the middle of rehearsing for Virginia Woolf, and then took the week off for the 7 days. And then I was going to go back to Virginia Woolf and go back into a tech week for Virginia Woolf. So it was like I had 2 tech weeks in a row, because the 7 days was a tech week. I mean, it was a tech week. But I think it went really, really well. I think we had the most wonderfully supportive team that we could have put together in terms of actors, in terms of directors, in terms of writers. Greg Parker doing all the tech. He was like, if you need me there, I'll take care of that. And when I couldn't be at Virginia Woolf rehearsal, he went over to Virginia Woolf rehearsal for me. And, the just kind of, so I think we put together, and Aaron actually put together the most incredible team. He gets all of the credit for that.
Is he in the room? You should be out walking the dog, right, so that you can be honest and truthful.
No, he put together the whole team. And it was one of those things, like every couple of days, he'd be like, oh, I heard back from so-and-so, they're in. And I'd be like, really? Okay. This is great.
Really? There's people who like you?
Oh, everybody loves him. But
I know.
It's hard with the schedule that we had to create. I was concerned that people were just not going to be able to make that kind of a schedule work. Yeah. And for us, one of the biggest hurdles, we were actually talking about it at dinner tonight, because we're already planning next year's, is the one of the biggest hurdles was rehearsal space. And in order to have 4 shows be able to rehearse every single day, we needed to have at least 2 rehearsal spaces. Yeah. And, luckily Presidential Oaks has worked out to a degree, but they're a business that has people living there, so it's like we have to be respectful of the fact that, we're using their space, and thankful for that and cognizant of that.
I hadn't thought about that, because had the writers written something with this wailing or screaming or
wailing, screaming, massive sound effects that had to be rehearsed from day one, that would have been really, really challenging. Having the 2 rehearsal spaces in the same building was awesome, because originally we were like, okay, if we can't get 2 spaces at Presidential Oaks, maybe we could get, because the Hatbox was still paying the rent on the shack, but there's not a whole lot in there anymore, and security wanders through in and out. And I was like, but maybe we could make the shack work. But then it would be complete separation of the groups. It would be 2 groups are at the shack and 2 groups are at Presidential Oaks, and there the twain shall meet. You know, it's like, I wouldn't have been able to catch up with any of the groups. Aaron wouldn't have been able to step in and watch them all in the same night, kind of thing. So having Presidential Oaks as a rehearsal space was very helpful. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do that again next year. That would depend on their schedule. Mm-hmm. You know, if they need to use that space, you know, or any of those spaces, obviously they get priority. So
I saw the gas station down the street seemed to have a lot of space there.
Yeah. You know, we have a 3rd floor finished office space that maybe we could use for one group, but then my neighbors, because we are in a condo, my neighbors would be probably like, why are they screaming?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll be the biggest challenge, I think, for us is going to be, you know, that those multiple rehearsal spaces so that we can have them happening simultaneously.
What do you think would be the biggest hurdle to have to overcome? And did it happen? I mean, were you like, oh, well, that went by pretty easy?
I thought the biggest issue, honestly, was going to be people being able to memorize lines. I was like, that's a huge ask of people that are working full time or, you know, doing other things that's just a huge ask. And some people just need additional time to get it, you know, to kind of stick in their brains. So I thought that was going to be the biggest challenge, especially once the scripts came out and I saw what people had written. I was like, holy crap, Ian Allen has to memorize all of these long speeches about Mozart and technology and So then when I saw the scripts, I was like, oh, that's an even bigger ask.
Well, this is between you and me. Don't tell Aaron, but he did a good job in selecting the cast. I'm sure he can't hear it.
Yeah. We definitely lucked out with the cast too, and all the pieces. I mean, the mixes of all the casts were awesome.
Yeah, it was very refreshing because they were just so novel. You know, they were all different. You know, literally. I mean, there was no overlap in thought, no overlap in. There was no thread that ran through them all, you know.
There was no overlap, even in genre, because you had the 2 comedies that we kind of bookended, but they were very different comedies.
Yes, they were. Yeah.
So see, I lived with Carrie L. She lived with me for a while.
Oh, we're going to get some gossip here. Okay, I got to put a little Chiron across there.
Before either of us got married, we lived together, so I was not as surprised as everybody else seemed to be with Carrie L's script.
We're breaking news right here, folks. Breaking news.
Yep. I'm fairly certain we've had the conversation about little dogs or just cats that you can walk. I'm fairly certain.
Stop right there. You don't have to divulge one more thing if you don't want to.
Yep. So I was not as surprised as perhaps a few other people might have been, but I wasn't surprised by what Greg Parker pulled together. I was surprised that he set himself up to have to do all that tech. Yeah. I was like, okay, you can't complain. It's your script.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. Gary Locke's script surprised me because I didn't expect it. I don't know Gary that well, apparently, because I just know him from the few shows we talked about. The shows I've seen with him have been all light and fluffy and like Gaskell stuff. So I'm thinking, he'll sit down and write something humorous as well. And good God almighty, it was so far from that.
Yeah. Well, I know Gary's big into science fiction. And so I wasn't super surprised that it went technology-wise. Aaron and I have done a few little writing games with some people, and Gary did one of them with us. And it was a very, cerebral science fiction style piece. So I wasn't as surprised by it. But I enjoyed all of them so much because they were all so different. I had said to Aaron afterwards that I kind of wish that I could have been in on one rehearsal for each group instead of only rehearsing with 2 groups the whole week. because it would have been interesting for me to be able to, kind of jump in and see, how each
hear that. I would have loved to hear your input had you been able to do that. Because
yeah. And I think we'll probably next year we might try to get a second assistant stage manager so that I can do that, and do more of the production managing, like seeing the whole thing come together.
A stage manager for each show.
Or a separate, Aaron's jumping in, or a separate.
He should be out walking the dog or getting a smoke. Don't you have to smoke somewhere, buddy?
He does not smoke. Yeah, so if we could get a stage manager for each show, that would be incredible. That would be a great opportunity.
You'll need a bigger budget.
Yeah,
you'll need a budget.
Yeah, yeah, it would, it was a challenge for me just because it made for some very long nights. I was there at 5:45 until after 10 every night for the whole
lock
week.
up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Lock up and double check that everybody had everything that they needed. And then I got home and had to do the rehearsal reports, for the two pieces that I was doing. So
wow. He's so
demanding.
So
I'm like, yeah, if we could, get other people next time, that might help a little bit. But
so at the beginning of the process, were you eager? Were you nervous? Before everything happened, like the day we're all getting together that Saturday. How are you feeling? Are you like, I don't know how this is going to go, or, I could go take a nap. I feel pretty good, or, what's happening?
I felt pretty good on the Saturday morning. I was actually a little nervous earlier that week when we hadn't finalized the props. We hadn't finalized. Aaron was the one who came up with the one line of dialogue.
Hang on. I need to talk about the props here for a second.
They were all from my basement. They all came from my basement.
I was talking with Jennifer, and I said, one thing I hadn't asked Aaron was, where did those come from? And we're pretty sure you guys have a bag that was going to Goodwill that you thought, we might get one more use out of this stuff.
One more use. Actually, everything was from my basement. We have a storage room in one half of our basement that it was like, literally, I was like, well, let's see what we have down there. I'm like, I'm sure I've got some garden gnomes and things like that, because I moved from a bigger house into our condo. So I was like, we got some stuff in the basement. We'll just see what we've got. And Aaron picked out the teddy bear almost immediately. Huh. And he says that I would have picked out the teddy bear eventually anyway, but I don't know if I would have necessarily. But he was the teddy bear was sitting in a corner of all kinds of stuffed animals. So, but he was definitely the biggest one. So picked out the teddy. Any
idea how that was going to end up? That was crazy.
No idea. I had a sense when Greg picked up the teddy bear and said, "Now I have a 3-person play." That was the first thing he said. I was like, okay. I had no inkling at all that it was going to be a, smoking teddy bear. I had like where that came from. No idea.
Looking back, I'm glad Carrie L didn't end up with the teddy bear because I don't know. I'm not sure where that would have gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was one of those, like I have a corner of sports equipment. And so I had tennis rackets hanging there and the tennis balls. And I was like, oh, well, that might work for someone, and then the scarf came from my closet. It's one of mine. And I was like, I have a Japanese silk scarf. So that would be something different and something unusual. People wanted a scarf. What were the other ones?
I have this sombrero I can use. I wonder what they would do with a sombrero.
That was an old hat that I used to wear when I had to mow my lawn. You were at my old house. That's where we filmed the 48 that year. And that yard was ridiculous. So I had to have the big hat. So that was an old hat that I had from my lawn mowing days. Now I'm in a condo, so I don't have to mow my lawn anymore. Somebody else.
Who would have thought someone would have given birth to it?
Yeah, that was not where I thought that was going to go. So we had the teddy bear, we had the tennis balls, we had the hat. Oh, and the saxophone was actually, oddly enough, it was in a pile of stuff that should not have been moved to my condo. It was stuff that had been left by my ex-husband when he moved out of my house years and years and years ago. But people just, like, when I moved, they just gathered everything from the attic. So it ended up in the basement. And I was like, I've got this rusty old saxophone that, I was like, we can open it. It's still a saxophone, but it literally, like, the bell is rusted off and everything. I'm like, so it's not playable, but it might be something interesting. So we just kind of grabbed things that would be interesting and give people flexibility, because we didn't want to force people into a particular niche unless they knew what they wanted to write with it.
It's funny how the mind works, right? All of those objects, they appeared in ways mostly that you would not have thought of them.
Exactly.
Which is really quite a feat when you think about it.
Yeah, it was like, okay, the tennis balls, she could have chosen the tennis rackets or the tennis balls, or, one or the other or both. And so the fact that she went with the dog toy, I was like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The teddy bear is obviously from left field. The saxophone was just very symbolic and in a really nice way. It was a beautiful image at the end with him kind of clutching the saxophone case. Again,
I want to say kudos to Ian for She had some heavy lifting to do there.
Yeah. Yep. And
the end when we found out his partner was
Yep. Yeah. And then you had the COVID bubble, and it was like, oh goodness, But luckily, Kelsey she's I've worked with her several times now, and she's tremendously good at everything she does. And she had some beautiful instincts about that show on the day. When we came in for the first read through with her. Yeah. We literally walked her through the blocking in about 10 minutes. And then it was like, all right, let's see what you can come up with the blocking, because you'll have the script with you. And she just has great instincts. And she brought a level of snark to it that I thought was important, because it gave enough contrast between Ian trying to be more flat as like the, almost robotic, and by adding that level of snark, I think that was good. That I'm sure has something to do with the fact that they're a married couple. And they can do that.
You think?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I wouldn't know what that means,
no,
Ray.
I know.
Is
he still in the room? Is he there? So when the scripts came out, you and Aaron must have maybe looked at each other and thought, what have we done? How is it going to go? Who cried first?
Oh, I don't think either of us cried. I think we were both so in awe of what came out of these people in such a short amount of time. I have never written a play before, but I have an MFA in creative writing. I've just never written a play. I've written other things, and I am a very fast writer. Once I get an idea, I do tend to, kind of churn it out fairly quickly. But I was just shocked how solid all 4 of these scripts were in such a short amount of time.
That's a very good term, solid.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put that, because I was expecting things to be more haphazard, sloppy-ish,
that it would force the director to have to do a lot of tweaking to get it to work as a piece on a stage. And at least with the 2 that I had more direct contact with through the rehearsal process, that was not a necessity for either of the directors to have to do a lot of, heavy lifting to make these scripts work. The scripts worked. It was just a matter of, okay, how do you get them on their feet, and how do you get, for the the art of dominance piece was, how do you get this to be as funny as we know it can be without taking it beyond the page? What the charm of that piece is that it didn't have to go beyond the page. It was subtle enough that the confusion of Ryan's character Stan was perfect. And there was just like, you didn't have to be heavy-handed with it. And Kelsey is not a heavy-handed director, so it was great to be able to work with her.
Yeah, I think when you finally see them on stage, they were very polished. I mean, they were like finished. There was nothing you would have added to them,
Yep.
You could have seen them saying, "Oh man, if I had another day or so to write some more, I could have done this." But when you saw them actually put up, they were done. That was what you would what you would expect them to be.
Yep, they were polished, solid pieces. They accomplished their task. They were entertaining. The audience had a fantastic time, which is obviously the primary focus. And allowing. I think my Facebook post that night was, it allowed 2 people who had never been able to call themselves playwrights can now call themselves playwrights. you know, and two people who had never put something from page to stage can now call themselves directors. Yeah. And that was Aaron's goal all along, was to be able to give people that chance in something a little less intimidating than putting a whole production together for a 3-week run. I mean, that's huge, you know, so it was fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a bit of a break from the heaviness of Virginia Woolf. You know, yeah, but it was still a lot of work even for that, you know, for that week. It was a lot, but it was really fun. And it was interesting to see, you know, I had the advantage of, and actually Sandra, the assistant stage manager, also had this advantage. We each got to work with a established director and a newbie director. And so it was interesting for me to, you know, go from working with Kelsey, who I've worked with before, to working with Mary, who was tentative as a director initially, but she was so incredibly prepared. I don't think she understood just how strong she could be as a director until she got down to it. You know, she walked in, you know, having the entire thing set up in terms of what she wanted it to look like. So she knew what she wanted the blocking to be generally. When it wasn't working, she was willing to change it, which a lot of new directors are not willing to do. So she was much stronger, I think, than she realized she was going to be. And I know she had been very nervous leading up to it. So
you wouldn't know it. And I sat in on her tech, and she was just in full control.
Yep.
She's like, no, move that back. We need this light there, you know, and this. Yep. And so she was definitely in control of her product.
Yeah. And even with the COVID bubble, it could have turned into something much bigger, and it didn't, because it was like, no, we're just going to work with what we've got. And luckily we have 2 solid actors, and we have a fantastic story, you know, so, you know, you just let them tell the story and we'll tweak it as we need to, you know? And so by that point it was only in the tweaking stage, which was good.
So about midweek, was there anything that was causing you concern? Were you at all? It doesn't have to be, but I'm just curious if you were like sweating something out, or thinking, gosh, we might not. I think
we were still not sure the order. I don't think we actually Aaron had a sense he wanted to bookend with the comedies, which was definitely the best way to go. But we weren't sure which comedy should be first. You know, do you open with the, you know, the teddy bear on the, you know, on the stage, or is that where you close? Yeah. And it was just a matter of, okay, which one of these? And because that piece had so much tech associated with it, because they had to cue all those over voices and, you know, that kind of stuff, we were like, all right, are they going to be able to get this pulled together? You know, do they need extra time? So I think it was the scheduling of how the run would actually be, and then figuring out the order of the tech. How, you know, because we knew we only had a certain amount of time to give everyone at the tech, and we had to figure out, okay, how best to utilize. And we've heard a couple of people mentioning the schedule, you know, and the scheduling was actually the biggest hurdle of the whole thing, was figuring out where everyone was coming from and the distance that they were coming from, and trying to be respectful of that. You know, Kelsey and Brian are both coming from a distance as directors. Kelsey has a little kid, you know, it's like, we don't want her, you know, we had to be aware of that. Val had a work schedule, so Val couldn't have done the earlier rehearsal slot. She had to do the later rehearsal slot. So it was just a lot of jumbling and juggling to get all that to work. And then figuring out the tech, it was a bummer that, you know, the people that were late, we were like, we have people that are in rehearsal till 10 o'clock, have the 7 a.m. tech. That's going to be a big bummer. You know, is there any way we can tweak that? So next year, you know, we'll see if we can maybe do an evening performance instead of the matinee. We don't know for certain yet. That'll come along, and we're happy that we just got selected for the pitch. So now it's like, okay, now we can, you know, learn what we can from this one. And
so, you know, that's interesting. That's one of the things I hadn't thought of, and I hadn't spoken to anybody else about, was the time of the show. So did the matinee, were you at one point, are you concerned? I mean, I could see it being at night without a problem. You know, the matinee worked, but do you think you might have had a better draw?
I don't know if it would. I mean, we did fairly well. I mean, we were hoping that we would, you know, have about as many people as we did. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think it was the the timing of everything. Because originally Aaron had pitched it as a matinee so that wherever it got scheduled, it wasn't going to interrupt what was already scheduled for the evening on the Hatbox stage. It just happened that the stand-up comedy night for that night got canceled. So it was one of those things, like it was scheduled for a matinee because there was supposed to be an evening performance of something else. So that's why we kind of built the whole thing around the matinee schedule. For next year's, there is nothing that evening. So we're kind of figuring out, okay, would it be better to do an evening? And that might give us a little bit more time for the tech. Yeah. It might allow people, if they want to see the other performances, they could come in and see the tech, of a couple of the other pieces if they needed to. So, so we'll take everybody's schedules into consideration as much as possible. That's the biggest hurdle with something like this, is like there are a lot of moving parts. And even with only, 12 actors and 4 directors, the writers didn't have to be there other than on the initial Saturday. But it was just, okay, how do you get all these actors and all these directors in the same room at the same time, for a week straight?
Did you talk to the writers afterward? Did you? You heard from them? Did they?
I think all of them have submitted the little survey, the little post-performance survey. I haven't read a lot of the survey results yet. Aaron's been kind of compiling all of those.
Hoarding them. We call them hoarding them.
Hoarding them.
They must be glowing about him, so he's hoarding them.
No, I think actually he's being very respectful of the fact that I'm in the middle of another show. We'll see, a week for when Virginia Woolf closes on Sunday, I'll be more able to jump right into other stuff.
How to access them. So
Is he back from walking the dog?
He's like, I should walk her.
So you haven't, I was going to ask you then about the feedback. So you haven't personally.
I haven't personally had a whole lot of feedback. I've chatted with Carrie L just because I chat with her fairly frequently, and I think she enjoyed the experience. And for her, because she is a new mom and she's got such a busy life, that I loved that we were able to give her this opportunity to just get that toe back into the theater because she's itching for it. I was glad that we were able to do that. She I don't know why she thought she wasn't a writer. I feel like it's just in her. She's incredible.
Well, a comedy anyway.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like, she has a lot of things to say, and I think she could give herself that time and that platform to do it. I think she could do tremendous work.
Yeah. She was saying with the baby, she does have a lot of like quiet time where she could sit and pounding out some pages.
Yeah, as he gets older, I worry that will become less and less until he's in school. Until he's in school, and then give him over to people like me, and then she'll have some of her time back.
Yes, she will. Yes, she will. So overall, I thought personally it was a wonderful event. And I've said to other people, I was honored. After it was done, I felt honored to have been asked and then to participate. I was very fulfilled leaving it. And unlike a lot of shows, I don't know, well, there was just something, I don't know really what it was. It's something intangible, but when it was done, I just had this feeling of, I don't know how to describe it. I really can't put my finger on it, but I had completed something in my life that was missing. I mean, it's crazy, but, and I've done a lot, but there was something that fulfilled. So there was some niche that I did not know existed that fulfilled. So
yeah, I thought it was wonderful. On the day, I was just like so excited, and everybody had such a wonderful time. And it was like I feel there's almost a performance fatigue that creeps in when you get into a show that you've been rehearsing for 6 or 8 weeks, and then you have a multi-week run. It's like, okay, I love these people, but I don't need to see their faces for a little while. And I think we didn't have that, because it was like we were all pulling in the same direction for 7 days, and then it was over, and it was like, oh, now I have the post-show blues, and I had no idea that was even going to happen because it was so fast. It was like a real post-show blues, and then I jumped right into tech for my other show, so I was like, all right.
Some of us didn't have that joy.
Yeah.
I guess that's all my questions for you. You have a unique perspective coming from the stage manager end of it. Was there anything that you thought was unique to your view of what was going on that no one else has been able to target or speak about? I mean, you saw the props, you saw the people scrambling for costumes or, different settings to go along with it. Were there things that you just hadn't been prepared for?
I think initially we thought that we had given the writers enough freedom to be able to do what they wanted, but also enough like restrictions, like, okay, this is, we have to be able to work with what we can find in a week, and so we desperately wanted a different table for the Art of Dominance piece and Ian's piece, because we really wanted it to look like a conference table, like a training room table. And we just could not find that, and that was a little disappointing that it was like, okay, it's just a set piece. We can, and the acting, made it work, and the other props made it work, and it was fine. But that was one of those things, like every day I was like searching Facebook Marketplace going, there's got to be a little conference table somewhere. And it just never appeared until actually I got a text message from someone on Thursday of last week saying, hey, are you still looking for a conference table? And I was like, yeah, 3 weeks ago. I think for a lot of people, like people don't think of stage managers necessarily as being in on the process early. I get a lot of directors will contact me. Hey, we've got a show going up in 2 weeks. Will you stage manage it? And I'm like, well, you don't want a stage manager. You want you want a wrangler. You're not looking for a stage manager if you're hiring me 2 weeks before the show. But I think being able to be in from the ground up is such a privilege. And it's one of those things to be able to see everything and be able to support all the different creatives in a way that you're still out there and you're still doing all kinds of stuff. And on the day, we didn't know how we were going to do all the transitions, but luckily Sandra and I are like, yep, we're just going to get it done and we'll figure it out. And we'll do it, just the two of us. We don't need to have an army of people. And it's just like, okay, we'll get that done. But I think not only seeing it as 4 individual pieces, but also, okay, how is this going to work as a production? How is this going to work so that it's seamless, so that it feels like one piece going into the next? Yes, they're different, but we want it to feel like an event. That's more the stage manager part of it. It's like, okay, how are we going to get this to work? Not
You're also lucky there were no special like effects or anything that were written in. Nothing we did tell the writers to try to keep that to a minimum, only because we didn't want Greg Parker literally just had that morning, to be able to pull everything together, and he wasn't going to be able to rehang lights. It was going to be, he's got to work with the lights that we've got there. We don't have time to order other lights. We don't have time to rent other lights. So we've got to work with what the Hatbox has. So we did have those kinds of stipulations with the writers, like plan on, 20 to 25 minutes, try to keep the set as minimal as possible, make sure the prop is featured. It's not just set dressing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise there's no point in having it, Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of fun. The advantage is we didn't have to strike much, because good point.
The strike that afternoon was much, much easier. It was like, all right, throw all the rando props in my trunk and we can go home.
Pull up the tape and
yeah, really. It was like, all right, there was a ton of spike tape, but that was about it. And everybody kind of brought in their own little bits, like that bench. Brian brought in the bench for your piece. Sandra was the one, I think Sandra was the one who found the little high chair for the teddy bear.
Oh, that's funny.
Because they realized that it wasn't going to work in a regular chair. They needed something different. So they did their own search to find the high chair, because that is not something that the Hatbox had readily available,
Oh, huh.
Yes, like,
high chairs, huh?
Yeah. We don't have a whole lot of storage in the Hatbox.
Well, Andrew's a magician, though. Couldn't he just like conjure something up and...
I don't know. I honestly don't know if he had any idea what to expect from the day either. I think he was pleasantly surprised too. Oh, he knew the casts we had been able to kind of put together was excellent. I was like, this is, a dream team casts, dream directors. It was one of those things. I'm like, this is awesome. This is incredible. But I don't even know if Andrew had any sense of what it was going to, end up looking like. And he's done all kinds of stuff.
I know.
You know,
I know.
so-
It'd be very
so-
interesting to see how next year's turns out. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
want to knock on wood here. But, now you've set a standard, and so it'd be very interesting to see how it matches up with this year.
Yeah, I think someone had mentioned in one of the previous podcasts about the recording. We did try. We did try. Yes, we tried, and the memory card in the recorder was full, and so it was just one of those things. We have a setup already at the Hatbox. You just put the SD card in, hit record, and whoever used it last had not cleared it off. So we tried. Tried. Yep. And unfortunately, you don't know that until you hit record. It doesn't tell you that it's already full. So
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. But I was like, I need to make sure I mention that to somebody so that they know we did try.
Yeah. It's kind of something someone should let the stage manager know,
Yep, because we were in the booth. Andrew and I were in the booth trying to get it to work, and there were 2 memory cards, and both of them said card full.
Man.
So I was like, okay, this is meant to be lightning in a bottle that will, someone else is going to have to just take these pieces and do them again.
Jeez. That's incredible. That's too bad. That's really sad.
Yeah, it is.
I'm glad to know at least you tried.
Yes, we did.
Okay, I've kept you long enough. I'm sure there's somebody in the background who's waiting to be with you.
Well, the dog is sleeping on the couch. So
okay. All right.
She's all set.
Tell him I said thank you, by the way, for lunchtime pizza that day. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Well, thank you for your time. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
You're welcome.
I never get to talk to you except when I'm not recognizing you. So it's always nice to.
Yep. Unless I'm wearing the name tag, it's like, oh, who's that
I'm
person?
terrible. I'm just terrible. I'm telling you. And there you go. Another great one in the tank. That one's going off to the memorial. Have a great day.